Welcome everyone to another exciting video. If you're not yet a subscriber, go ahead, subscribe right now. Today we talk about France and why it lost that submarine multi-billion-dollar contract with Australia. Let me know your opinion in the comment section. Let's begin. France, the current Australian Prime Minister, Scott John Morrison, uses the excuse of diesel versus nuclear energy. Diesel fuel submarines are noisier, easy to detect by radars. Nuclear energy submarines will stay submerged longer and are quieter. When I started to think about this subject, I can't help to think about how the US military industry has been losing some credibility against weapons made in Russia in the 20-year war in Afghanistan. I will explain. In the last decade, the US military industry's credibility of being the very best has declined. The drones went intercepted by Russia's Pantsir S and bout M2 system. Middle East nations standing up with confidence against NATO's military has changed the world's perspective. These are the very same nations most people in the West believe as living in the Stone Age in every way possible. These nations ended up with so much military equipment for one specific reason. Every single war in the Middle East has nothing to do with fighting drugs, human rights, or against terrorism. A sad truth to acknowledge. These wars have to do with contracts signed with Western private military corporations and private security industries based in different areas in the Middle East. We cannot forget about the pharmaceutical industry in the West and other sectors that benefited from harvesting opium in Afghanistan. The different wars in the Middle East were a business. The number of weapons used and before, how much weapons were purchased and how much weapons were left behind. Because they had so much weapons, they didn't care if 10 or 7 were left behind. NATO did not count with Afghanistan farmers. Learning to use the weapons left behind, taking control of Afghanistan. When NATO got kicked out of Afghanistan, the multi-billion-dollar contracts got canceled. The same with the United States military complex. Those contracts canceled. With this loss in Afghanistan, the armed complex needs new contracts to continue its influence. How many years do you think it takes to build a submarine? How many years will it take to build 12 submarines? And then the weapons each submarine carries, plus maintenance, right? And I've been hearing that there are 5 or 3 more submarines that could be built after the first 12 are built. So a little bit of history. In 1977, the National Conference of the Australian Labor Party passed a motion favoring an indefinite moratorium of uranium mining and the Anti-Nuclear Movement Act. So this was signed in 1977 by Australia. How can we think about that September 15th, 2021, that's about a month ago, this agreement that Australia signed with the US military arms complex? Australian leader Scott John Morrison, is breaking the agreement signed back in 1977. This is what happens when leaders are lucky to other nations. In this case, Macron was told by the boss to move to the side. The US was taking over. This is a very similar move, something Trump would do. Here we are seeing how a powerful nation, France, has lost dominance. I want you to remember Britain, Germany, France, Spain, and the US are colonizing nations. How have you noticed how the European Union has broken up into small groups? This new alliance between Great Britain, the United States, and the territory colonized by Great Britain today recognize Australia. 190 countries have signed. Allies who signed the pact against the use of atomic energy see this situation as erosion of trust. China sees it as a threat at a global level. China also says this could start an arms race, very similar to the beginning of the Cold War. Something quite strange is that the European Union did not know about anything of this. Brussels found out just like you and I did through the news. In case you don't know, France was stunned by the Australian decision. Experts on the subject say France's military complex had started working on 6 of the submarines. So that means Australia will pay for the submarines to the US and somehow has to compensate France lost. France says this was a unilateral decision, and Biden behaves the same way Donald Trump does, right? Move to the side, remember that video where he pushed one other world leader and he moved to and he walked to the front, right? In front of everyone else. New Zealand leaders have a zone where they don't allow nuclear weapons in their waters. So New Zealand has announced that they will not allow Australian submarines to use those waters. So Australia, if you look at the map, Australia will have to go around. We can see how Britain and the US has decided to make France pay for not signing agreements against China and their economic expansion. As colonizing countries, Great Britain and the United States have long known that they will have to destroy the economy of Russia and China to stay with the power of the planet. This is what they're doing with Australia. Is the very first step to take control of Indo-Pacific. Friends, family. As I have already told you, the North American government has no friends, allies. They see the world citizens as servants only. That Biden is ultimately demonstrating long-range strategic planning. Europe will have to unite or will lose its power in the world stage unless they allied with China and Russia. Then NATO will have to take a whole different course that has from what we know nowadays. In an interview, Prime Minister Macron explained how the stab in the back from Australia and the US will not change his country's strategy and allies of the region in the Indo-Pacific. Australia, I believe France and Germany signed a contract back in 2018 with China. That meeting back in 2018, they spoke about the new Silk Road. They publicly signed an agreement known as the Comprehensive Investment Plan. We also need to make clear that France has many interests in the Indo-Pacific territories. Australia is essential to United Kingdom and to the United States. due to their geo position. Also military, commercial location. Australia is between the Indo Sea and the Pacific. They will. This is important for the United Kingdom and the U.S. because they can block ships and commercial ships from reaching other areas in Europe as well as Africa. At the same time, makes puts military closer to China, especially the submarines, the nuclear submarines. Macron and Biden will meet at the end of October, and it will decide, will Macron join AKUS, the mini NATO? Will France decide to turn its back on their second most important trading partner, which is China? The European Union does not have much moves in here. U.S. has always limited its commercial alternatives, making the U.S. its #1 trading partner. A perfect example is a Dutch company that prints chips, technology chips, and the U.S. told them not to sell this technology to China. This type of interference from the U.S. will continue. Another example would be the interference towards Germany, and I'm talking about the Northern Stream 2, right? And the energy problem that they're having through all of Europe is because they listened to someone that their only interest was to keep the whole the entire energy business. And now the U.S. is not able of meeting the quantity of energy that Europe needs. This interference is the cause of the energy problem throughout Europe. We will need to see what happens in the future with Marine Le Pen and Germany's elections. Negotiations will not be easy for France to get out of the European Union. Germany has an inclination to Ukraine. The problem with Crimea. I believe Germany would prefer Russia to be less sovereign, but that will not change. In Germany, we will have to see which political coalition is going to remain. In Germany, there's usually 2 or 3 parties that need to work together to make everything work. The Gringos government has always imposed its will on France as well as in Germany. The European continent somehow has to find its sovereignty. Europe is not as strong as they would like the world to think. They are not strong enough to face the conflicts of interest that the multipolar world faces. We will have to see if the European Union reinforces its alliance or France decides to leave the European alliance. France, without the European Union, would lose a lot of world influence. Well, my friends, this is everything for today. Thank you so much for reaching this point of the video. Don't forget to share, comment, and like the video. Well, I also like to leave you with this message to help someone in your community, as you may be the only one who does. Ciao, ciao for now, my friends. Until next video.